So in Dolan's elementary school, you couldn't run on the playground. No one actually knows why, but the rumor is that once a kid was running on the playground during recess, tripped, and broke their arm. So now, the poor kids just have to sit around the playground and talk. They also made a rule that, since the middle school was close to the elementary school, and middle schoolers get out before elementary students, middle school students, along with their parents, have to wait in front of the school and not move around until the elementary students get out a half hour later. Other things they banned were dabbing, Pokemon Go cards, most shorts, jewelry, and more. Dolan could go on and on.
Slap Tam got a detention for skipping class. The only thing about that is, he was in class. It was in study hall, so everyone was quiet, including him. When the teacher called his name while taking attendance, Slap Tam raised his hand but didn't say here because he was way too focused on his work to say here. Much less turn around to check to see if she saw his hand or not. Then the next day, Slap Tam was told that he had detention. He tried to explain to the teacher what happened, but she didn't care for what he had to say. Poor little Porker.
A stranger once walked up to Slapped Ham and said, "Hey kid, wanna make some money?" At first, Slapped Ham thought he was crazy, but then after hearing what the stranger had said, he thought he was really crazy. The stranger needed him to play dead on the sidewalk for 2 hours as a part of a social experiment to see if anybody would walk up and help. Afterwards, the stranger paid Slapped Ham $25 for lying down and doing nothing.
Once I got a call at about 1 in the morning. The woman on the other line was hysterical, screaming, "She's stuck in the pool table! She's stuck in the pool table! Hurry over!" So I dragged myself out of bed, got my tools, and went over to the establishment. Once I arrived, I popped open the pool table and found some illegal substances, a $100 bill, and a kitten. Well, that and a bunch of quarters and pool cues, but that stuff's normal. The woman was so happy to have the kitten back, but she also tried to claim the $100 bill. Now, as dumb as it sounds, I can believe somebody took a kitten to a bar and it crawled its way inside of a pool table, but I can't believe that they also dropped a $100 bill in there in the process. So I pocketed the 100, put the slate back on the pool table, and walked out of there. Technically wasn't paid for that job, but I walked out $100 richer, so I think that counts.
The worst nightmare that Pringle ever had was when he was 11 or 12. He was at his grandparents' house and went outside to check out a noise that he had heard. When he went outside, he froze. Pringle saw a wolf twice as big as him, with orange fur and glowing red eyes. The wolf stared at him, and it growled. Suddenly, it jumped on Pringle and started biting his arm. He screamed for his grandfather, but he didn't answer, so Pringle kicked the beast, and it fell off of him. He ran, but it caught up and started chewing his leg. Pringle screamed, then he grabbed a knife and stabbed it in the heart. But it only just got angrier. The wolf then suddenly jumped and it bit his throat. And that is when Pringle woke up, panicked and terrified.
One day, Nixium was having his lunch break at work. He'd recently quit smoking but still hung out in the smokers area to chat to his co-workers. When a co-worker asked Nixium why he wasn't smoking, Nixium explained that he had quit cold turkey. His co-worker said, "Oh, right. So how does the cold turkey work? Do they just put it on your chest and it cures your addiction?" Nixium just face-palmed hard.
Nixium was something of an awkward kid. One day he got the courage to ask a girl out, and what do you know? It worked! They started role-playing through text. Sexy role-playing. The conversation ended up getting all spicy. So in his saucy state, he thought of the most romantic thing he could say.
"I'll lick the nipples of your breast."
Somehow, this didn't deter her. Neither did the time he tried to shove gummy bears in her ass. Nixium, what the fuck?
Ramona went through a rebellious phase in high school where she was constantly getting into fights and arguments. One day, she was a smartass to her teacher, so her teacher decided to discipline her in front of her whole class. Ramona had just started her period, so she was feeling very cranky and emotional. She definitely did not like getting yelled at, so she decided to get some very crazy revenge. She waited for her teacher to step out of the room, then she climbed up on her teacher's desk, pulled down her pants, and smeared blood all over the teacher's things. Her teacher was furious. Ramona was given 3 months detention and sent straight to the principal's office.
One time, Captain caught the bus to work. He was just minding his own business, reading, when he overheard some loudmouth teenager in the back seat. The teenager was telling his friends a story about how he had jumped a neighbor's fence, broke into their house, and crept around in the dark, looking for stuff to steal. Now, Captain tried to focus on his book, but the guy's story took an unexpected turn. He told his friends he got busted while going through the neighbor's stuff, but instead of a big confrontation, the teenager and the neighbor just started jerking each other off. Captain was really disturbed by this. The weirdest part was the guy's friends clapped and cheered and thought the story was awesome.
When Emoji was in middle school, he liked to use substitute words for curse words such as fudge for fuck and rear end for ass. During his 8th grade year, he was sitting in drama class and everyone was being silly. One kid, a friend of his, started hopping around in some form of improv, and Emoji meant to say, comically, "Sit your stupid rear end down." But instead, he said, "Sit your stupid ass down." Lucky for him, the classroom went quiet right when Emoji cursed. The drama teacher pulled him aside and gave him a choice. Either write an essay or take the pink slip to the front office. Like a moron, Emoji tempted fate and attempted to say, "Fudge, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to say that." The sentences that slipped out were, "Fuck, I'm so... oh my god, kill me." He ended up writing an essay and taking a slip to the office.
When Nixiam was about 12, he and his family were going to get some KFC. Nixiam lived in a quiet place, and normally it wasn't very interesting, but it certainly was this time. Nixiam didn't know what the guy was on, but he just spread out on the countertop screaming, "Gimme chicken!" in front of the employees. Baffled, Nixiam and his family just hung back as the guy rolled off the counter, landing flat on the ground. He yelled with an over-the-top "Ow!" before running out of the place like a chicken.
When I was younger, I remember there was a kid who lived near my house named Drew. Now, Drew and me used to be friends a long time ago, but we had a falling out, and well, because he was one of the more popular kids at school and on the bus, he had a lot of friends and buddies ready to back him up. So one day, while riding home on the bus, Drew decided to start teasing me. He threw paper balls at me, and he called me names, and many other kids joined in. I probably had around 9 or 10 people mocking me, throwing stuff at me, saying that I wasn't handsome. Yeah, right. And so forth. So you know what I did? I sat there and I waited patiently. Because you see, only Drew and I got off at our bus stop, so I knew I'd get my revenge soon. So eventually, we get to our neighborhood and we both stepped off of the bus. Immediately, I grabbed Drew and I threw him to the ground and proceeded to beat the tar out of him. I even took his head and I repeatedly smashed it into a large oak tree multiple times until our bus driver freaked out, stopped the bus, ran over to us, and stopped the fight. By that point, Drew's entire face was covered in blood and he was crying his eyes out. I will say this, Drew never made fun of me again. And all those people on the bus that watched this happen, they didn't make fun of me either. One time, Ghost Toast came home after drinking all day with his work colleagues, and he decided it would be a great idea to make a toasted sandwich. He made the sandwich just fine, but while he was waiting for the toaster to cook, he completely fell asleep upright in his chair. When he woke up, the first thing he noticed was smoke and a small piece of shriveled coal where the sandwich toaster once was. He was very lucky that nothing else caught on fire.
Snoopy was attempting to be romantic with her friend Doopy, giving her subtle hints that she had a crush on her, but Doopy thought she was joking around. Weeks later at a party, Doopy showed up in a red dress and Snoopy was in a tuxedo. She had bought Doopy flowers, knelt down on one knee and asked her to be her girlfriend. She laughed, took the flowers and said, "You're so sweet, but I'm seeing someone else." She was shut down in front of everyone. Doopy got off her knee, went back home and cried as she ate the box of chocolates she was supposed to give her.
When Nixion was growing up, his parents were very strict. Whenever he got into trouble, they would make him stand facing the corner of his room on his tiptoes. To make absolutely sure he didn't put his heels down onto the ground, they would put thumbtacks on the floor under his feet. On more than one occasion, his ankles lost control and he ended up falling directly onto the pins. It was a very cruel and unusual punishment, not to mention incredibly painful.
Moji was 15. His mum took him into town for a day of shopping. After an hour of driving from store to store, their car ran out of gas. Emoji and his mother had to take a bus to the nearest gas station and then take another one back. They were tired and cranky when they got to the gas station and they had to wait half an hour for the bus to get back to their car. When it finally arrived, the bus doors opened and they saw a couple stripped naked and having sex right at the front of the bus. Another guy was filming them with an expensive looking camera. Emoji and his mum were disgusted, but they had such a long day that they didn't want to get off and wait for another bus, so they had to put up with it. But it's not all bad. A few days later, the people on the bus were arrested for public indecency.
Dolan was 15 years old. He snuck into an abandoned schoolhouse with his friend Talop. They were looking around when they heard a thump coming from a basement hatch. After they worked up the courage to go down into the basement, they discovered a room full of dusty school uniforms that smelled like dead bodies. Suddenly, they heard a young girl giggling, and they decided to get the hell out of there. When Dolan went to open the hatch, a young girl stuck her head out over the exit before the hatch was slammed shut. They ran back to Dolan's house nearby, and they looked at the schoolhouse through Dolan's bedroom window. And there, a shadowy figure looked back at them from the house before it slowly closed the back door and was never seen again.
One day, Sybil Spider wanted to give his friend Doopy a nice compliment, so he walked up to her and said,
"You're such a beautiful bimbo."
Uncomfortable, Doopy thanked him, but then asked,
Do you even know what a bimbo is?
he said.
Yeah, a woman with a sexy and attractive body.
Then Doopy said,
Yeah, that's part of what it means, but it also means that the woman is empty-headed and would have sex with anyone without even thinking about it. A slut is a simple way to put it.
At first, Sybil Spider didn't see it that way because he just thought that bimbo was a normal word for female. It took him a few days to finally understand that bimbo was a word that women don't like to be called and apologized. Doopy forgave him because it was just a big misunderstanding.
On Nixion's 21st birthday, his cousins decided to take him to stay in their cabin in the woods to celebrate. They were drinking ferociously, and Nixium only remembers waking up with sore legs and smelling like gasoline. He asked his cousins what happened the night before. They told him that after a few hours of drinking, they drove their truck out into the woods to go shooting. However, they were so drunk that they accidentally shot the truck's gas tank and the wheels, and the airbag had deployed. They had to walk 10 long miles back to the cabin. Luckily, no one was harmed.
Once, when Sidious was in 4th grade, there was this girl he really liked. He finally decided to make his move, even though she had a reputation of being a sadist. Sid went to talk to her and wanted to say,
"Hello, my love."
but he was so nervous that he said,
"Hi, I like to eat burritos. Bye."
The next day they laughed at what he said to her the previous day and are still friends to this day.
Gooby was 16. She worked part-time in a call center with a guy in his early 20s. Many of her female colleagues acted like he was disgusting, and she felt sorry for him, so she chatted with him. One day, they finished early, and Gooby's friend suggested that the four of them go for lunch, Bad Teeth Dude included. Off they went, but on the way, the other two made excuses and went away giggling, leaving Gooby and Bad Tooth Guy alone. She was immediately super uncomfortable, and it got worse as he explained that he'd planned it all to get some alone time with her. After getting coffee, Gooby said she had to go catch her bus home. He offered to walk with her, and on the way, stopped and said that they were right beside his house if she would like to see his cat. She agreed, and they went up to his apartment and saw a little black and white cat. She bent over to pet it, and heard a click behind her. He had locked the door. He told her that he would drive her home instead. Then, led her to the sofa where he insisted she sit and watch a children's cartoon. At this point, Gooby was petrified. Halfway through the film, he put his arm around her and got real close. He whispered,
I'm not really 22, Gooby. I'm actually 30, and I know you're only 16, but I think we can really make this work long term. Plus, my cat likes you, so will you marry me? I mean, I'm a catch.
She told him that she needed to think about it, then asked if she could use the toilet. She ran the fuck out of there and called her dad. He quit his job the next day and she never saw him again.
When Doopy was little, her neighbors had cows in the fields near their house. But one day suddenly, they were all gone. But instead of telling her that they went to heaven, or they went to stay at a new farm, her dad told her that they died and were buried in the fields, and that they were now ghost cows. So for 6 years, Doopy thought there was a bunch of dead cows in her yard, and the ghost cows protected her when she slept.
The worst thing a babysitter has ever done to me was when we had a very nice one. She took care of me, always fed me, always helped me out. Till one day we started noticing some of the things in our house kept vanishing. We would look around and my mom always was mad at me for that reason. She would be like, where did you hide it? Did you hide it? Where is it? Where is it? And she would be stumbling on her words, just scaring me. She would even scream in Spanish and she would say, ¿Dónde está la vaina? And that means crap in Spanish. She was really pissed. And she kept on putting the blame on me, but I had no idea where any of the stuff was. She ended up beating me with a belt, and man, that hurt a lot. My legs would end up being red afterwards. Then after a couple of months or so, we ended up finding out that she stole items here and there, to the point where she stole so much, she stole about $10,000 worth of items, and she would only do it when my mom wasn't around and she was only taking care of me. She ended up having an argument with my mom. Until then, we have never figured out what she did with the money or where she even is to this day. When they were in high school, Ghost Toast and his friends did all kinds of crazy stuff for cheap laughs. One time they went through a drive-thru on foot and pretended to be an invisible car. Another time they had a Nerf gun war on the children's playground in the park. One night, after catching a late movie, Ghost Toast and his friends went to a nearby golf course. Since the place was littered with golf balls, they began throwing them at each other as though it was a snowball fight. When they got bored, they arranged the golf balls in a phallic symbol and curse words. Then they stuffed their pockets with more golf balls and went home.
Robo was at work and in a bad mood, so he decided to go to the break room. When he arrived, there was a young girl sitting in the back reading a book. He sat near her to eat his food. She waved at him, but he just nodded back and looked away. Robo did not feel like talking to anyone. After an hour, she got up and went to the cafe. Robo was still hungry, so he followed her there. It turned out that the girl worked at the cafe. After a week or so, he tried getting to know her, finding out she loved One Piece and Attack on Titan. After 6 months, Robo decided to give it a shot and ask her out. But she said, not yet. Robo asked if that meant no. She answered, no, it means not now. I have too much on my plate. Instead of giving up, Robo waited another week before finally asking her out again. She said yes, and it will soon be their 18-month anniversary. When Dolan was little, he went on an awesome Boy Scouts camping trip. To get there, they had to drive for several hours and take a long boat ride. Over the week, Dolan, being Dolan, broke all the scout rules and got caught littering and wandering off. His scout leaders got so annoyed with him that they took away his seasickness pills as punishment. Dolan got really severe seasickness and spent the whole boat trip and most of the car ride vomiting. That's so brutal.
When Pandora moved into a new share house, she asked her new roommate if she could split the cost of things like toilet paper. The housemate told Pandora that she doesn't use toilet paper. She only uses her hand to wipe, and a sponge which she left on the side of the sink for number twos. Pandora respected her choice, but couldn't help but feel sick seeing her poo sponge sitting next to the toilet every day. It was especially gross when she could tell from the color of the sponge which time of the month it was.
Gooby had been working at McDonald's for 2 months, and it was her first day out of training. She had to make drinks that day, but Gooby kept giving people the wrong drinks and was getting yelled at for not getting the food out fast enough. Eventually, the tea urn ran out, so she had to get to the back and get a new one, and they were really heavy. They had a shelf where all of the sauces were kept, and while Gooby was bringing the new tea urn to the front window, she crashed into the shelf and knocked the whole thing over. There were sauces and bags everywhere. At least $300 worth of sauces was crushed. One night, Emoji took a walk to a local lookout. It was pitch black and Emoji could barely see. As he was walking up the stairs, he accidentally tripped over a stranger who was down on one knee. The stranger dropped the small ring he was holding and swore. The ring bounced twice and came very close to going over the edge. It turned out the guy was in the middle of popping the question to his girlfriend. Emoji felt terrible about ruining his big moment. Hellbent took a vacation to Boston and decided to travel on the subway. He was listening to some music when a guy suddenly sat down across from him. There weren't many seats free, so Hellbent shrugged it off. Hellbent then got off the train and took a tour of Fenway. While getting something to eat, he noticed the guy from the train was sitting nearby watching him. Hellbent was a little creeped out, but he went and saw a street band and later went to a photo booth. Sure enough, the creepy guy followed him to those places too. He was there wherever Hellbent went, watching him from afar. Hellbent was really freaked out and jumped on the next train seconds before it departed. He sat down, looked around for the guy and breathed a sigh of relief because he'd lost him. A minute later, the guy somehow appeared and took a seat across from Hellbent. Hellbent freaked the fuck out and jumped off the train at the next stop. He ended up spending 3 hours in the Boston brewery just to lose him.
One time, when Ladybot was in a laundromat, a drunk man sat next to her. He complimented her hair, which she thanked him for doing. Then he began to talk about his desires of becoming a tattoo artist. Ladybot nodded and gave one-word answers, as not to be rude, but still let him know that she wanted peace and quiet. She was hoping that he would get the message and leave, but he didn't. Instead, he blankly said, "The police are saying that I murdered my wife." Ladybot froze and looked around the laundromat, wondering if anybody else heard. When she asked him why the police were saying that, he began rambling on about how he and his wife had an argument where he threatened to kill her. He went on to say how it was bullshit that the police weren't taking his side. Ladybot was still in shock about how much he was confessing. He told her to look at his phone for some reason and that she will be his witness in court. Ladybot faked a smile and looked over at his phone. He finally walked away, and Ladybot saw her opportunity to run out of there.
Andy Mations was once babysitting a friend's kid, and they were eating lunch together like normal, when she noticed that the little boy's right hand was curled up into a strange, half-opened fist. Andy Mations asked him what he was holding, and he showed her what was in his hand. He was holding a squishy ball of dead worms. There were over a dozen of them just squished into this nasty, unmoving ball. She was horrified and cautiously said, "The worms have to go back to their worm families." The kid was upset, but finally agreed to put the worms back into the garden.
When Honeybits was about 40 years old, she genuinely believed that all toilets were sentient. She also believed that one of the toilets at her school was a toilet princess and that she would one day rule the world of lavatories. She'd always try and use that bathroom in order to talk to her. She still has absolutely no idea where this belief came from.
Mimi used to work 2 jobs, one at an arts and crafts store and the second at a sandwich shop nearby. There was a guy that frequented both places because, for some reason, he was fixated on Mimi. One day, he finally got up the nerve to talk to Mimi beyond normal customer small talk. The first thing out of his mouth once he broke that threshold was the creepiest thing Mimi ever heard. He told her that he liked her skin and that it looked like porcelain. At the time, she was kind of flattered because she had low self-esteem, but the more she thought about it, the more it creeped her out, and she's glad she never fell for it.
When Pandora was in high school, she dated the perfect guy. He was kind, considerate, and made her laugh all the time. The only problem was, he was a total psycho. He had an explosive temper that made Pandora very worried. For instance, one time, Pandora and her boyfriend were walking around the playground. Pandora wanted to go on the swing, but there was already a kid on it. So, her boyfriend decided to yank the kid off and shout,
"You're in my girlfriend's swing! She wants to swing there, and she always gets what she wants! Move it or I'll fucking murder you!"
The kid got the hell off the swing, and Pandora broke up with her boyfriend a short time later, mostly because she feared for her own safety.
Gergak was a freshman. He had a big crush on a girl named Yulia. Gergak wanted to take her to homecoming, so he came up with a plan to ask her out in his history class. First, he emailed his history teacher to get permission. Then he set to work making this big sign that said, "Will you make history and go to homecoming with me?" The next day, Gergak sat next to Yulia in history class. He waited for the right moment and then showed her his sign. Yulia was shocked. With the whole class watching them, she awkwardly said,
Sorry, but I'm already going with someone else.
The whole class laughed at Gergak and started sending tweets about it. And pretty soon, everyone in Gergak's grade knew about his epic failure. Gergak even catches the same train at home as Yulia, so there's just no escaping the awkwardness.